Welcome, good evening to Young Israel Century City's COVID-19's financial impact discussion. What does it all mean? I want to thank in advance our moderator, Howard Levkowitz, and our panelists, Rafi Cohen, Selwyn Gerber, Peter Feitelberg, and Aric Zamel, who you're going to be throughout the evening. We ask that everybody mutes themselves. The only ones that will be unmuted will be the panelists. After their presentations, we will entertain questions, and then we will unmute you during the question. But at this juncture, everybody should be muted. This is a very important panel discussion for all of us. At Young Israel Century City in particular, you're hearing a lot of different shiurim that are feeding the spiritual component of how we cope with the crisis. But as the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says, in ein kemach ein Torah, we also have to worry about the financial health of each and every one of us and the community at large. So again, I thank the panelists. They are experts in their field. They're all members of Young Israel of Century City. I'm a proud rabbi of every one of them. So I really thank them for accepting my invitation to be here tonight and to participate with us. Without any further ado, I hand it over to our very capable Howard Levkowitz.
Rabbi Muskin, thank you for that introduction. Thank you to you and Rabbi Proops for inviting us to do this, and thanks everybody for joining us. I'm sure there are a lot of competing interests when you're quarantined at home on a Sunday night. As Rabbi Muskin said, this is about financial health. We are not discussing anything having to do with physical health. That's going to be a different panel on a different night. It's really our goal tonight not to talk about global macro issues. We know everybody has a lot of access to different sources of information. This panel is intended to focus on practical things that people can do in their own lives with their own portfolios, their own financial situations. If you wind up getting any really good tips tonight and making money off of them, the rabbi would like to talk to you about Meiser afterwards. I assure you, we'll leave that between you and him. We're going to start off tonight with each of our panelists, letting them briefly introduce themselves. And also, I'm going to ask each of them to start off to tell you what their best and worst investment was going into the end of February of this year. So we're going to start with the shul's treasurer, Aric Zamel.
Director at UBS. I'm a financial advisor, and we work with clients to do four things. We manage their investments, we help facilitate loans, we set up and oversee retirement accounts, and we work on their estate plan as well. Best investment over the going into March, I can tell you in stocks, Amazon has done very well. Gold has been a good investment. Worst investment, I'd say bank stocks going into March did pretty poorly, as did real estate.
Okay, and a former treasurer, Peter Feitelberg.
Good evening. My name is Peter. I have a accounting firm on the west side. We have 11 people in the firm, and primarily we deal with it's a tax shop. So we have a lot of inbound planning from your foreigners investing within the U.S. We do a lot of deal structuring, but it's primarily a firm that services a lot of startup companies, entrepreneurship, internet-based, movie type related on the post-production side, and real estate.
And then Rafi Cohen, who was very instrumental in helping the shul get its mortgage. Rafi, you're on camera. We can't hear you. Rafi, can you unmute?
Maybe you need to unmute him.
Rafi, or we can see you, we can't hear you.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I was not able to unmute before.
No problem.
Thank you for having me on this panel. Do you hear me?
Clearly.
Okay. Hi, I'm Rafi Cohen. I work at Israel Discount Bank. I've been with the bank since 2006. I work in the commercial real estate lending group. We have a branch in Los Angeles downtown and as well as Beverly Hills. We're headquarters in New York City. I'm hoping that from my experience being at the bank since 2006, prior to the last recession, hopefully I could contribute to this panel. The best investment I made so far this year was doing a year's worth of business through March. And also that's also my worst investment as well. Hopefully, we all pan out, we all come out of this crisis without major issues.
Thank you, Rafi. And our final panelist, Selwyn Gerber, who is a longtime member of the shul, does a tremendous number of things in the community as a real Baal Chesed. Selwyn?
Thank you for your kind words. I hope I am able to live up to your accolades, and I'm very grateful for them. I'm Selwyn Gerber, originally an African-American. In some parts of me, I still am. Came here in 1977. We were the first South Africans in the neighborhood, and were responsible for many of those who came in. I formed my CPA firm in 1986, and we have a full-service CPA firm in Century City. Formed a wealth management firm about 18 years ago, and we manage money, and we also focused on long-term financial planning. The best investment that I made this year was simply the decision to not change anything in the face of the onslaught of bad news and to stick with core principles, because a well-designed portfolio should withstand whatever comes along, and thank God ours did. So thank you so much, Howard. Thank you for including me in what I would politely call a mizuman.
All right. Thanks to all of you. We are going to go through, for all the participants, we're going to go through a series of questions tonight, and I'll give you an outline of those. We're going to talk about the federal programs, what people can do for both businesses and on a personal level. We're going to talk about other sources of liquidity that exist outside of the federal programs. We're going to talk about applicable tax changes and strategies, follow up with a little bit on portfolio management, and then we have some time at the end for questions. A number of people have sent those in. If you would like to still send questions in, please feel free to send them to Rabbi Muskin. They will all be anonymous. And if we have time to get to extra ones at the end, we will add them, although we've already got quite a number of those. Going on to our first substantive topic, the federal government passed the $2.2 trillion CARES Act, the largest stimulus in US history. Just for people who are having trouble wrapping their head around that number, that's about half of all federal spending last year. Through all of World War II, in adjusted current numbers, we spent about $4 trillion. This is without the $4.5 trillion that the Federal Reserve is using in its various liquidity programs. It's a tremendous amount of money. And the question I think a lot of people have is, how can I, with my own business and on an individual basis, access money? So Aric, we're going to ask you to address this first. And let's please focus just on things that are going to be applicable to people individually, nothing about airline bailouts or subsidies for securities programs, just things people can do in their own businesses.
Sure, a summary of the program. So the government passed the CARES Act, which related to the benefits the government's providing because of the coronavirus. So it came in four forms. One is the EIDL loan, stands for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Two is the PPP program, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, which a lot of people are familiar with. Three are loans for larger businesses, which we're not going to get into, and four are tax credits and deferrals. So I'm going to highlight the first two loan programs, since people are probably wondering about that. So the EID, you can apply for both. We'll start with the PPP. So the PPP is for smaller businesses, less than 500 employees, including nonprofits. It's a loan amount of the lesser of 2 million or 2.5 times the average monthly payroll, up to 2 years, to 1% interest rate. And if certain conditions are met, the loan is forgivable. There's no underwriting. It's a very simple process. You apply through your bank. They send it to the SBA and usually get an answer within a few weeks. The other is the EIDL. That's for up to $2 million. It's a 30-year maturity, a rate of $275 for nonprofits, $375 for small businesses, and it does require underwriting and a personal guarantee. So those are the two main programs. I'll touch briefly on the tax credits that are part of the program. You're allowed to delay payroll taxes until 2021 and 22. There's also an employee retention tax credit of 50% up to $10,000 per employee. The CPAs can get more into that. And there's also with regard to IRA accounts, there's no required minimum distributions for 2020, whether it's a regular IRA, 401k, beneficiary IRA. And in addition to that, the government allows you to withdraw up to $100,000 as a coronavirus-related distribution without penalty from any number of retirement accounts. You still pay tax on it, but there's no penalty. So people who need liquidity have access to cash.
So, Aric, thank you. That was a lot of facts and very quickly. Hopefully everybody got them all. And maybe opening it up to some of the other panelists to, I think, add on to that, both on a business and an individual level. And I think some of the things that people may find helpful are each of you have been through issues with your clients, some of the technical problems people have experienced in accessing these programs. So.
Hi, Aric. Yes, I would like to add something to what you have said. As the federal government has been really proactive in trying to roll out these programs even before the recession has hit, because they're expecting the GDP for the second quarter to be at extraordinary numbers, and they're trying to pump as much money as they can into the economy. I've been dealing with the PPP program mostly in the bank, where a lot of the banks have really took their concentrations away from conventional loans and really have shifted towards providing these PPP loans. And the reason why everybody's trying to grab onto it quickly is that there's only a limited amount of funding, and it's really going to be first come, first serve. They already had their first round, and that has already ran out, and right now they're in the middle of their second round. What a lot of people, a lot of the clients we had in our bank, what they realized was they first went to their main relationship bank, one of the larger banks that are already SBA lenders, for example, Wells Fargo. Do the application as soon as they open up the federal government opened the application time. And what they realized when they opened it up, that those applications weren't really the applicable applications that the government was going to be using for this program. And it was the entire rollout ended up being a mess. So it was important that they really go to their relationship bank and understand and communicate well with their bank, because a lot of those clients that went to Wells Fargo came to us, and we took a little more time to roll it out. But if you have a good relationship with your bank and you have good communication, it's key for getting the SBA loan in place, because it's really, it was a mess being rolled out, and you have to really have a lot of trust in the bank you're working with. A lot of the big banks will only handle their larger clients, and they'll kind of put the smaller clients behind in the line. So I would suggest going to a community bank or a smaller local bank that you have a relationship with, if you do have one. But it's a very important program, and you're basically getting your loan forgiven if you meet the criteria that they put in place.
So, if I can just add something to that, the big issue, having got the money, is to make sure you spend it in a way that's compliant so that it is forgiven. It's not just a grant. It's a grant if you do all the right things. And I would just suggest to you that the window is extremely small. Everything you have to do takes place in 2 months, starting on the date the funding is received. So if you got a PPP loan, you need to be meticulous about how you spend that money so that it is forgiven. And I would suggest to every one of you that if you did get one, set up a separate bank account for that, so that there could be no question about that, what that money was used for, and use it for the purpose for which it's designated, which is rent and affiliated kinds of expenses, up to 25%, and 75% for payroll. There are other tests, but accounting-wise, it'll be easier for you to substantiate when you have to, before loan forgiveness happens, to substantiate that the money was used appropriately if you actually have a designated account into which the funds came and from which they went out to the purposes for which they were designed.
Selwyn, thank you for that helpful tip as well. Peter, you look expectant.
No, there's one thing just to add, just a couple of items. Everything was actually covered. The idle is basically shut down because the funds are not yet appropriated, new funds. There's 10 billion, but they are working through the backlog because there was a lot of abuse, because it was initially people thought that they would be given a $10,000 grant, but it really is $1,000 per employee. So it was crunched down, and they are preventing people from refiling and not being honest with their applications. Regarding the PPP, Selwyn is right. We have a worksheet which I can email you, Howard, or to the shul, and they can just circulate it around. We did it in Excel for our clients, how to go and track the usage. You've got a 60-day term, and the clock starts ticking as the funds are received into your account. Not when the loan docs are signed, but when you receive the funds. And you need to go and track it because everybody wants the forgiveness. The banks are really pushing the PPP because it's similar to a 7A loan from the SBA, but there is no personal guarantee. So it's got to do with risk management. And that's why the PPP program is the preferred one.
So one other thing I just want to make sure people heard that Rafi talked about, which is the importance of banking relationships. You know, I've seen this play out across the country at a number of companies and also at nonprofits. And there's been a wide variance of outcomes, some people getting their money quickly and smoothly, other people not getting it. And you don't always know why, because the SBA isn't known as a paradigm of efficiency in normal times, and this has been an unprecedented onslaught of things for them to process. But if you didn't have a good relationship with a bank, you were at a real disadvantage in this process. And although the conventional wisdom often is, you know, big banks can do a lot of things, and they can, and that's certainly where most of the assets have gone recently. In many cases, the smaller local and regional banks were much more effective and helpful to their customers in getting these things processed than the large banks were. So moving on to our next topic is ways to get liquidity outside of the government programs. The government programs obviously are terrific. They've been helpful, but they don't apply to everybody, and we've been focused really on things for business owners. And what we'd like to talk about is ways that people can get money outside of the government programs. And obviously there are loans, there's debt relief, there are other things, but I think it would be helpful, Rafi, maybe you're the formal banker in the group, if you want to start on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to touch base on basically talk about the difference between 2008 and today. In the recession in 2008, it was really the banks that kind of got us into the recession, where there was a credit crunch and really there was no liquidity in the market. And that was really the big issue. Today, it's actually the entire economy has shut down. But the banks, right now, so far, they're still intact, and they still have the liquidity to lend out, as well as the government being proactive in really reducing the Fed fund rate to zero. So if you're on a floating rate loan, they already created liquidity for you by lowering your interest rates. But in regards to getting a new commercial real estate loan, banks have really started to be ultra selective. because there's really nothing you can't really underwrite based on any market because everything is closed, and the expectations what's going to happen in the future. It's very difficult to get a loan approved these days. The banks, in the most part, are doing okay, and they have the ability to lend, but it's the credit on each request is just very difficult to get through these days. But what banks are doing is, besides for the PPP program, is a lot of the existing portfolio where a lot of the companies or the real estate properties or even businesses are not bringing in any cash flow. They're really, it's really the banks are really coming together, and they're really giving relief to the borrowers. Where in a lot of cases, they're offering to their clients without even requesting to give 3 to 6 months of payment deferrals, or if they don't give payment deferrals, most banks are giving interest only or giving principal payment deferrals. So that really does help the borrowers, to free up some of their liquidity and temporarily kind of get out of this crisis until hopefully everything will be over in the near future. A lot of the banks are really expecting, they're projecting that about 3 to 6 months. I really feel like the economy will start to pick up again after if the virus ends or not end, or if there's a relief in the spread of the virus and businesses start to reopen. They really believe that this will be a V-shape recovery, where it will be a dramatic downturn in the economy, but they really expect the turnaround to be pretty quick. We actually are still lending. I actually got a loan approved about a week ago with all the businesses being closed. So it's not like banks are not lending at all, but it's a lot more tricky to get a loan approved.
You may be inundated after this call. I see there are now 78 people on this. I suspect you're going to hear from a lot of them.
Yeah.
So maybe, Rafi, we'll move on and get some other ideas from others on the call as well on things people can do to tap into liquidity in this environment. We've all read and seen, large companies accessing the markets. April was a record month for investment grade issuance. So large companies like Boeing issued bonds in record amounts in April. But that doesn't apply to the people on the call. They're not getting the backstop of these government programs that are supporting the bond market. So what can other people do to get to access liquidity in this environment?
Well, if I can just chime in on that, just a couple of thoughts. First of all, just in terms of the shape of the recovery, everyone has their favorite letter of the alphabet. Is it a V shape, a Y shape, a W shape, an L shape, heaven forbid? I want to go on record as saying that I do not believe this will be any letters of the alphabet. I believe we're heading for what I would call the Nike swish. And if you know what that looks like.
It's a swoosh.
Swoosh. Sorry, the Nike swoosh is what I'm suggesting. If you've ever looked at Nike, you'll recognize that shape. I believe that's what we're looking at.
Here you go, Short. Here's the visual.
There you go. That's the visual. That's it. Sharp decline and then a gradual increase. And I'll stand by that and would be dearly delighted to be wrong. But that's, by the way, if we had a Nike swoosh, that would be Dayenu. It would be just fine. In terms of access to funds, I think you know all of the ideas. The thing that we tell people, though, who don't have really great credit is draw down all the lines of credit, because they could be withdrawn and taken away from you unexpectedly. So if you're not really solid and you have any question whatsoever and you have an unused line of credit or a HELOC ready, I would suggest that people who don't have really great financials or who are fearful that they might face difficult times where the line could be taken away or they wouldn't be able to justify an interrogation about it, taking it out is a good proactive and defensive move in really rough times. And we don't know that we're through the worst. We all hope we do, but one doesn't know. There are a lot of experiments taking place this month around the country and around the world, and we don't know how those will work out. The market tends to move like a bunch of sheep, all following a particular way of thinking, And I would just say to you, we all need to be very cautious. We are not out of the woods. I hope we are. I wish we were. But in case we're not, remember what I've told you. If you have unused lines of credit, take them out, put them safely somewhere where they'll be there if you need them, because you don't know for sure that they will be there when you need them if you're not of a really great credit quality and if there are any issues lurking in your financial situation.
And maybe just a follow-up note on that. I wouldn't worry about perceptions by your lender if you do what Selwyn's suggesting. Starting the first week of March, many of the largest companies in this country did just what Selwyn is suggesting. They drew down on their lines in record amounts. Unlike in 08 and 09 or after 9/11, companies big and small, strong and weak, drew down on their lines, and were getting told to by their major investors because people were concerned that the banks might try and find some excuse to cut off access down the road. So.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to what Solon said. It's very good advice, because I just know firsthand that banks initially a lot of line credits were drawn down, and banks already implemented some policies or new policies when people ask for advances, that a lot of these lines are actually cancelable lines of credits where the banks can cancel it for any reason. And if they see that you're using it to hoard cash, some banks would cancel the lines of credits. So it's important to, if you have access to it, to use it if you need it.
To add one thing as well is that Wells has stopped initiating new HELOCs. So even though that there is sufficient support from the Feds with liquidity, the banks are still taking it on themselves if they will not initiate new business. So that is smart, whereas the larger firms drew down on the cash, but they were able to issue either bonds subsequently, or they are now renegotiating rates. So what I'll be recommending to our clients to go and do is that if they have a margin facility, to try to go back and see if they can go and negotiate a lower rate on the margin accounts.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Peter. We're going to move on to everybody's favorite topic, at least the two CPAs, which is taxes, opportunities in this environment, strategies. We have the unprecedented move from the federal government of delaying tax filing deadlines by 3 months. You get that usually in a disaster area, certain parts of the country, but never nationwide like this. And so there are also a lot of interesting opportunities that this opens up. And Peter, we've got you on the screen. You want to start?
All right, so the CARES Act provides on an individual level, everyone knows about the $1,200 recovery rebate. This is really an advance credit against your 2020. So if you do not have a refundable credit in 2020, this is for you to go and keep. If you do, it's an advance payment against it. Regarding retirement plans, it was mentioned earlier about that you can do a $100,000 worth of your draw from a qualified retirement plan. From the tax perspective, the 10% penalty is waived if you're under 59 and a half. And if you take the money regarding the R&D, the required mandatory distributions, if you did take it out in January, you're able to put that money back in before July 15th. And if there was a withholding tax on it, you have to put the full amount back in, the 100 cents on the dollar, not just the 80 cents. And then that amount will not be taxable. There is a little bit of a plug here for the shul. There is new, a $300 above the line charitable contribution that even if you do not itemize, you can make a $300 charitable contribution, and that will be a deduction. In addition, for other cash charities, there are limitations based upon your income, your adjusted gross income, and those are waived for 2020. On the business side, it was briefly mentioned earlier that there is this retention credit. $5,000 a employee. It's very similar to the paid leave credit, but we're not going to get into the detail for this. There is a payroll tax deferral. So if you borrowed money on the PPP program, you cannot do both. It's either you can do the payroll tax deferral or you can go and borrow the money on this. What a really good benefit that is going to be available for 2018, 19, and 20 is that the 5-year net operating loss carryback is back in force. So if you have a loss in 18 and 19, if you haven't filed 19, you can still capture it. In 18, you can always do a minor return filing, and you can carry back that loss 5 years back, and you can free up taxes. Other areas, there was a patch that was called the retail glitch. Whereas if you put money into tenant improvements, leasehold improvements, after 2017, for 2018 going a year forward, there was a 39-year life. It should have really been a 15-year life, and Congress never fixed it. Now it is a 15-year life on qualified tenant improvements for non-related parties. And the benefit with that is that you can go and enact bonus depreciation, so you could then write it off. You do not need to wait the 15 years. That's for federal. Alternatively, something else a little bit different is if you're filing for unemployment, it's called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, the PUA program. That started on April 28th. Whereas if you are self-employed, you are eligible for unemployment. If you cannot prove your income, the EDD is going to give you $167 a week. That's for 39 weeks. And the feds will supplement $600 a week for 13 weeks. But there was a rush for that on Tuesday. I haven't seen anyone yet receiving funds, even though the EDD said that they will waive the 1 week period. A couple of other minor items, that the safe harbor provision for a defined benefit pension plan. And the planning issue is that if you cannot afford it, you don't have to make it for this year. Someone may say, make it if the market is weak. So you could then purchase securities at a much cheaper price. But if you cannot afford it, you could then either delay the funding, but it'll then not blow your plan. That's it. I want to just keep it short.
Peter, thank you. That was a tremendous wealth of information. People who love tax are probably enthralled in taking notes. Hopefully we didn't lose anybody else in the process. Selwyn, you want to wrap up our tax presentation?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thanks, Peter. You certainly covered all the highlights. I'm going to add a few supplements and then move on to the estate planning opportunities and perhaps obligations that we have now. First of all, for everybody who's in the taxable position, we should all be looking at withholdings, because if withholdings are generally based on anticipated income for the year, anybody who thinks the income will be decreasing should be looking at withholdings and cutting those back. Estimated payments should be reviewed and revised as necessary. You might find, most people will find, that they owe less tax in 2020 than they owed in terms of estimates, and those would provide additional cash for those who need it. For those who have portfolios, tax loss harvesting is a gift from the IRS to investors. And basically what it means very simply is if you buy something for 100 and the price has gone down to 80, you can sell it, realize the loss as a taxable benefit, and then replace it with something that's very similar but not identical. And I could give you lots of examples. If anybody wants, you can request that. But basically, it's a very easy way to turn lemons into lemonade, called tax loss harvesting. If you do have any securities positions that have declined, do a Google, call your CPA, or send me an email. It's a very good time to do Roth conversions. Anybody who has an IRA should know that it ultimately will come out fully taxed at the highest marginal brackets. And what a Roth conversion enables you to do is to pick up the tax now and never pay it again. So if you're going to be in a low tax bracket or you think tax rates are going up, and you have significant IRAs or retirement funds, a Roth conversion is something that should be considered. As Peter said, early contributions to retirement plans and getting your money to work for you in this environment is probably something that ought to be thought of. And then some generic ideas we're very big on, for those who are in a position to do so, to set up out-of-state trusts. Just remember, Nevada has no state tax and many other states don't, and it is 100% kosher to set up a trust out of state, provided the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. We do a lot of work in this area, highly recommended. Marginal tax rate for Californians is over 13%, and it can be saved if handled correctly. And the last 3 words are the most important that I told you. We already covered the amended tax returns, and certainly anyone who has losses or had losses in any of the previous years should absolutely file amended returns. Bear in mind the tax brackets now are less than they were. So a tax loss taken back is likely to give you, or could give you, a very significant refund as opposed to using it now. I want to move now on to what may be the most important part from my standpoint of this discussion, which is the people in the community who don't have estate plans. And I want to ask Rabbi Muskin to give it his rabbinic seal of approval and hechsher when I say this, that if you have a family, if you have children, and you regard yourself as a serious Jew, then you need to either have family wealth to take care of them in the event that you were to pass away, or you need to buy life insurance. And Rabbi, do I have your support rabbinically on that? I would like it to be declared an avera, in the truest sense, to have children, to have a family, and not provide for them. And I've seen it happen several times over the 42 years that I've lived in the community. Several times it has happened that somebody dies and their family is not taken care of. If you need life insurance and you cannot afford it, come and see me. We'll help you out. But I would not like anybody in our community to be in the category where they don't have an estate plan. And by the way, the news is every one of you has an estate plan. It's just that some of you did it yourselves and some of you took what the state of California provided for you. And that's shameful. So I'm on a crusade. I'm on an absolute crusade that everybody needs to have an estate plan. The last thing you want is fights on the steps of the court about who's going to be the guardian, who's going to be the trustee, who's going to take care of the kids. So I'm on a crusade about that, if you'll forgive me. Life insurance is essential. It's cheap if you're healthy. And wills and trusts are absolutely essential. And I'm using that in capital letters. For people who have wealth, there is a huge group of opportunities available because of the unique, perfect storm of low values and low interest rates. And there are complex trusts and trust structures that are available to you. Your estate planner can certainly help you. If you want to, anybody can call me. No charge, no obligation. We don't do that stuff. I just care about everybody doing the best they can for their family and for the community. And there are phenomenal philanthropic opportunities with charitable remainder trust, charitable lead trust, and other philanthropic instruments that could be very good for your family and very good for the community. So with that tirade on estate planning and hopefully some helpful ideas on tax, I will sign off and wish everybody an uneventful future health-wise, and may the machala pass over us uneventfully.
Selwyn, thank you for those words. Thank you for the passion and the advice. Let's finish up on tax because we do have one more topic, and then also we'd like to get to questions. Aric, you wanted to cap us off? Can we unmute Aric, please?
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of business owners have or should consider setting up retirement plans, such as a 401k, a profit sharing, or a pension. And the contributions to those for last year, my understanding has been extended to December 31. You can still make a contribution for 2019 defined benefit pension plans, for example. That's one idea. And I want to just echo what Selwyn said on setting up the trust, having beneficiaries in every account, life insurance. I want to add that you should have the general rule of thumb is 6 months of cash on the side. You know, that's not invested. I think now, given what's going on, you could even say 12 months of expenses on the side in cash. I think is appropriate. And another thing on titling, just even if you have a trust, and I see a lot of people that with the terms to set up a trust, but they don't bother getting it correctly. So the trust doesn't really do anything if your accounts and your real estate aren't under the trust. So it's important to check the title on your house, on any investment properties, on your bank accounts, your investment accounts. Make sure that you either have everything in the trust or you have a beneficiary on every account. I think that's very important to check at this time.
Thank you. The last question that we have before we move on to those that were submitted is a question on how people should allocate their portfolios. And we have a long-term source from the Gemara and Baba Metzia. Rabbi Yitzchak says that you should divide your assets in three: shlish bekarka, 1/3 in land, shlish rakja, a third in merchandise, and shlish tachat yado, and a third basically in liquid assets. The Mar Shah says that you should have real estate because it's secure, you should have merchandise because it has higher returns, and you should have liquid assets so that you can act opportunistically. And so if each of you, and we're going to move through this fairly quickly so that we get time to address the questions, could give you any thoughts you have on portfolio management you think that would be helpful to share, that would be great. Aric, you were already up. Let's go back to you on this one.
Sure. As far as cash, yeah, I mean, it's definitely important to have cash, at least 6 months, maybe 12 months of cash on hand. Cash doesn't pay a lot right now. So the rates on money markets are, 25 to 35 basis points. On a government money market, that's probably what you're getting in a bank account. It's probably close to zero. So yeah, a little bit in cash, it's important. The rest of your investments, unless if you have your own business and you have money in merchandise, that's fine. But our personal stance is you should have money split between real estate and a portfolio. Portfolio could be stocks and bonds, could be alternative investment manages also, but I think you need to have both. That's very important. And as far as where things go, I'll just leave thoughts. No one really knows what the direction is going to be, what shape the curve is going to be. I think everybody is in agreement that it's uncharted territory. But long-term returns, stocks do about 9 to 10% a year. Bonds historically have done 4 to 5 year. It'll probably be lower in this rate environment. So you want to have allocation to stock in your portfolio, however much that is. And you have to remember that, throughout all the ups and downs over the long run, I think returns will gravitate to their historic means. So it's important if you have stocks and you don't need the liquidity to hold on and not to sell at this time.
If I can just chime in over the first of all, if anybody would like, Jonathan, my son, who's a partner with me in our wealth management company, wrote a book called The Wealth Blueprint. If anybody would like a free copy, send me an email. It'd be my pleasure. It lays out all the principles that we've seen over, many cycles. sg@rvwwealth.com. Send me an email. You'll have your book within a few days. I would just say for people looking at income, dividend growing stocks are the new bonds as far as we're concerned. You can't make a living at 0.5 or 1%. Warren Buffett, who bought Coca-Cola many years ago, gets a return now of 60% of his original investment. Just remember that. He gets more than twice his money back, and more than his money back every 2 years. An entire investment. That took a lot of time. But the fact is, you can do better with a diverse group of solid dividend-paying stocks than you can with bonds. And there's a role for bonds, but it's very limited as far as we're concerned. You can't do anything with 0.5 or 1% a year these days. And there are companies out there, and particularly there are methodologies to sort them out in a dynamic way, so that you're always holding solid dividend-paying companies. And dividends are also advantageously taxed, by the way. So we're very big into dividend-growing companies. They've got a tremendous track record, and there are techniques and strategies to make sure you own, in a Darwinian kind of way, the best of breed at any point in time, with dynamic changes made in real time within the portfolio. So the other thing I will just tell you is a statistic you might want to think about. When I came to this country in 1977, the Dow Jones was 850. I'll say that again. The Dow Jones, when I came to the United States, was 850. It's now what, 25,000? And if you add the dividends paid over the last 42 years, you're well over 35,000. Enormous. So don't be afraid. The investing in equities is like watching a person walk up the stairs with a yo-yo in their hand. Your job is to watch the feet and not the yo-yo. If you can do that, you'll be a great long-term equity investor. And if you can't, stick with bonds.
All right. Rafi, I don't
Yes.
know if you have anything to say about yo-yos and stairs, but let's hear about portfolio management.
I don't. I'm not a wealth management expert, but what I can say is diversification is key to having to lower your risk in your portfolio, which is basically the basics of investments. Whether you're in real estate or you're in some other business, it's important to have enough liquidity, depending on the size of your portfolio. Especially if you're in real estate, it's important to have sufficient reserves in each of your properties. The clients, the investors that are really usually fare well in these downturns are clients that keep enough liquidity as well as reserves in their properties. It actually allows them to take advantage of the downturn, where if they have the liquidity, they're able to buy properties at the lower prices and able to increase their value in the future. But it's important, you want to have at least 20% liquidity in your portfolio. But it's important to diversify your portfolio as well. Not just have it sit in real estate. If you are just in real estate, at least have it invested in different types of real estate, whether it's a multifamily or office or even the location, because real estate is location and means is a big deal as well in real estate. So if you can diversify as much as possible, you lower your risk. The more you diversify. So I think it's really good advice to divide your portfolio 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but it might not apply. It might apply back then, but today it might not be that same type of division. It should be. I would think you would at least keep a majority in assets like real estate or some other business, and have a smaller portion in liquidity and reserves.
Peter?
Would so I've always recommended passive in the investing, which is since the last great recession has done extremely better than active management. So if you will buy ETFs, if you want to buy the S&P 500, I'm generally a large cap growth. That's my sweet spot. A lot of people do not have that risk tolerance for it, but generally it has performed better even during this time now, whereas the Nasdaq hasn't dropped as much. So I generally guide for large cap growth and passive, and for clients to be mindful on the management fee and try to negotiate a very reasonable management fee, because it can be layered. If you have both a mutual fund that is charging and they have the trailing fee on the back end besides the front load, and then you've got as well the overall management fee, and you really want to be extremely low. You do not want to pay that 1% or even the 75 basis points. You want to be much, much lower for that, and stick with passive. So therefore you're not trading, but always balance and have at least 10 or 20% in your cash. I'm not a bond fan, never have been, never own one. And generally have sufficient cash that if the market does dip, then you have the liquidity to go and purchase in. And concur with the other people as well regarding real estate, as long as your cap rates are reasonable, which is a real challenge today, that you cannot purchase properties with a decent cap rate for it to go in cash flow. So you have to be mindful regarding the risk and how much down payment, because a much lower cap rate will result in a higher down payment on it, on the purchase.
So I'm just going to put a capstone on this one with an emphasis on the diversity. We are going through the third massive financial shock that we've been in this century, in 19 years, really. And after 9/11, we were all shocked that people would stop getting on airplanes. And in the great financial crisis, we were all shocked that some of the largest financial institutions in this country failed, and others were going to fail if the government hadn't stepped in. And today we are all shocked at a variety of things, including that people don't go to stores, restaurants, and that there is absolutely no revenue associated with the greatest hotel properties anywhere in this country and most of the world. And so you can have shocks on the investment front, you can have shocks on the employment front. I think, you know, the biggest lesson for all of us in this is that there are going to be shocks, there are going to be challenges in the economy, and you can't bet on just one thing with respect to certainly your investments. And if you have an ability to diversify your sources of income, doing that is a great idea as well. We're going to start with our first question, which is, we've gotten this actually a couple of times related to the bad press of the PPP, and we've gotten it in several versions asking about bad press associated with institutions and other entities taking these loans. Do we have a volunteer who wants to tackle that one? So,
as far as the process, Howard?
Aric, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the process opening up was a nightmare. You know, I was involved in filling out the Schul's application, so I've seen it. I've seen the different reiterations. The week that it came out, you know, the bank was updating us every day, asking for different things. I think we went through at least 4 or 5 different applications, just trying to get one submitted. I'm sure a lot of people also had that issue. Beyond that, banks you couldn't even get through. You called Largo.
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry to just reposition this. I think the questions we were getting around were around a lot of the bad press. And maybe if I can just interject on that, when you're describing, I think, people's frustrations with the program. And we've clearly, Harvard, a number of universities have said they're giving back money. Some large public companies have said they're giving back money. The program was not designed for large institutional owners of many companies to take the money because of the affiliate rules. I think that's the direction of these questions, is the bad press. And I'm maybe just going to jump in here and say, yes, there's been a lot of press on organizations that are not perceived as needy or having been within the intent of the statute. These applications, as Aric was saying, are tough. Everybody on the phone, including Aric, may want to add more when I'm done with this, can tell you how difficult it has been to get these things done. But if you comply with the requirements, you meet the definitional needs. I don't think most of the people involved in this, unless they're in a high-profile situation, a large capitalized entity, have a bunch of resources beyond this, are likely to fall into the category of bad press. These were designed for nonprofits and for all kinds of different small businesses. That was the intent of the programs.
Sure, and I think the reality is, I don't think you really know what the financials are of all these companies that are applying. I mean, the Lakers applied for this loan; they got a lot of bad press, but I don't think anybody really knows, what the finances are, except the people that are running the company. But yeah, I think the program got a lot of bad press. A lot of companies that probably didn't need it applied and got funds, and you're right, as you said, some of them are giving it back now.
So. We've got time for one more question. And what practical advice can you give to families who are trying to prepare for their future given this massive disruption, both near term and long term?
I would say the key is to develop a long-term plan. The whole point of retirement planning is it's a backwards operation. It's what does retirement look like? When are you planning it? And then how do you work backwards to a course of action so that the outcome is inevitable that you'll end up where you want it to be within the range of likelihood. And it starts with living below your means, which I know for many people is very tough. But let me assure you, there's only one way you build wealth, and that is to live below your means. Tzniut, which the rabbis advocate as a Jewish mindset, I would suggest goes way beyond the length of women's sleeves and the height of their collars. It has to do with how you live, how you speak, how you spend, and your attitude to money. And I think for those of us who've had the incredible honor of driving past Warren Buffett's house, he's a role model in many ways. And I would just suggest that all of us use this opportunity to relook at all the things I've just said. But for younger people, it's about building a long-term financial plan, starting with living below your means and making sure that the first bill you pay every month is to yourself.
Anybody want to add to that?
Well, I want to say that in the near future, it's kind of easier to live below your means because we're all at home. You can't really do the things that we were able to do in the past. We can't travel. We can't drive a fancy car places. So that makes it a little bit easier to do that. But it's important to take advantage of all the government programs that they're giving to families. And for the stimulus checks, it's important to make sure that you get access to that. There's an online portal through the government website that you could get direct deposits by putting your address in there. So you get that stimulus right away. Hopefully you get them soon. And then it's important to obviously everybody's gonna learn some lessons from this downturn and this crisis, that it's important to really set aside for these types of times. Put emergency funds in place that could keep you for at least 3 to 6 months. And in long term, just put money in your savings and basically learn the lessons from today.
So thank you. This program is scheduled for 1 hour. So one final question to each of you real quickly. Each of the people who has agreed to be on this panel tonight does a lot for our community. And we've been talking about finances all night, but it might be also nice to hear from each of you sort of the most interesting and helpful thing you've been able to do during this difficult time. I'll lead off on this one since it was this one was my question. We're in a business, I'm in the business of providing capital, and there are obviously a lot of difficult conversations with companies in this environment, but being able to do this and help provide and save jobs in a very difficult time, I think is one of the important things that we do. On a much more granular level, there are a lot of wonderful tzedakahs in our community. There's a lot that's directed through the shul. A friend of mine started an organization that is dedicated just to helping single working mothers in this time who have lost their jobs with their food bills. Which really resonated with me because we're talking about things like financial planning, but as we know out there, there's a lot of food insecurity and real desperate needs that go far beyond that as well. So Rafi, you're up. You want to just continue and close us out?
Yes, I mean, it's financial related, but it's interesting because I get clients that call me regarding various programs that we offer, but I also got employees that work for the clients that have their spouses that work in self-employed, and they have their own needs, and we really can't help them at the bank, but I was able to at least guide them to the right places so they can get the help they need regarding getting the application for the PPP program. I was able to refer them to a bank that can help them, and then also everybody on that's joining this panel. If you, our bank, we only have, we deal with only relationships currently at the bank, but if you don't have a relationship at IDB, I'll be more than happy to give you some referrals of banks that I think can help for people that have not yet applied for the program.
That's great. Thank you. Aric?
Just advice, I think, just for everybody, just spend less. Continue your tzedakah and really stay calm and don't make any major changes, because this too shall pass. However, many weeks or months may be. And I think part of staying calm is just building a routine for yourself. Having a routine for yourself, especially for the kids, probably more important for the kids, allows you to stay focused during this time.
Peter?
So for us, from a March 30th, we started getting literature out to our clients because it was a rush. It was really a mad rush. And we didn't charge clients for the idle application because we just wanted to go and help out people through this. PPP was a whole nother matter. But generally something that resonates, I was actually reading an article of some individual selling his home in Florida, is that he had this reckless, impulsive behavior. And many times, if you have a lot of clients that are within the industry, is that you have to guide them to go and live within their means, as what Selwyn mentioned. That's why the Okinawans are generally thinner, because they eat 80% of their full. This is the older generation. So, but it is tough to go and convey that to somebody and to nudge them to go and live within the means and then stay within the plan. You've got both your short term, which is liquidity, which everyone has covered. And then you've got the long-term plan of sticking to the financial plan, to your retirement plan, and try not to deviate. If you cannot afford the full amount, then pare it down, but still stick with the plan and take the emotion out of the investment. You just have to take it out. It's pure about the numbers.
Thank you. Selwyn?
Yeah, first of all, Peter's right. We're all genetically programmed to be bad investors, by the way. That's why most people buy stocks at the top and sell them at the bottom. Coming from Africa, as I do, you know that animals have the same instinct, which is where we get it from, unfortunately. When they feel very comfortable and safe, they herd. And when they sense danger, they flee. Don't do that. Charlie Munger, who's probably the wisest man I've ever heard, says the ideal mindset for long-term investors is equanimity. Look it up in the dictionary if you don't know what it is. It's a mindset worth emulating. In terms of what we do, at this point, I'm spending all my time doing anything I can to help anybody, either clients or people in the community, and I'm not comfortable giving any details. It's not my job at this point. But if anybody needs help, professional, personal, second opinion, sounding board, want to run something by me, pop an email. It'll be my honor and pleasure to help you, seriously. No cost, no obligation, no expectation of anything in return. You just send me an email, ask me a question, and if you want the book, my pleasure to give it to you.
Aric, Rafi, Peter, Selwyn, thank you very much. Rabbis Muskin and Proops, thank you for setting this up. And for those of you who haven't, it's time for virtual Mariv.